What's up guys, it's National Master Dem Apples here, back with another video, and today, yes, I know this has been requested for quite a while, and I'm finally doing it. It's a complete Sicilian guide. So let me flip the board. The Sicilian, for those who don't know, goes after e4 and c5. It's known as one of the most fighting responses to e4, and those who aren't content with symmetry against e5 and don't want to play like solid with the Caro-Kann like I do, but I've also played the Sicilian a lot myself. And so I'm not going to be recommending the variation of the Sicilian I play because it requires a lot of memorization, and it's not very tricky, but the one that I am going to show is very tricky and can leave you with a lot of wins, even if your opponents just play the most common moves. So we have knight f3 as our second move. Now, it's important to go over some sidelines first, right? So knight c3, this is the close Sicilian, and from white's perspective, right, usually he goes for g3, bishop g2, and knight e2. Or he goes for f4 and just tries to checkmate you. Brings all his pieces out, and this is called the Grand Prix Attack, and usually when people go knight c3, that's what they're aiming for. They're just going to try to checkmate you. So we're going to go e6. This is very similar to our response for like pretty much any other variation of these Sicilians, and it's going to be my response against knight f3 in this repertoire. So f4, I mean, if white's going to go for the plan, he's going to go for it now. But usually when you meet a strike on the flank, I'd say this is on the flank, you know. You return one in the center, so d5, and we are ready. We are ready. Here, take, and now we can see that white's pawn is a little bit overextended, right? It's all the way on f4, and his king is a bit weak. So we're just going to develop our pieces like normal. Bishop b5, bishop d7, and that's if your opponent's even playing these good moves. Black is still a bit better, simply because white always has a weak king, and he's not getting to our king yet. Our king is pretty safe, and yeah, without the e4 pawn, white doesn't really have much of an attack. d3, bishop e7, bishop e3, b6, just protecting our pawn, and now we're doing fine. One of the plans that we can go for probably is to start building up some initiative on the queen side, and yeah, black is doing pretty well here. It might not seem like it, but yeah, white's got a lot of weaknesses. We might be able to go for something like knight g4 later, or try to get a knight to f5. So, another common second move is c3, the Alapin. It's a really chicken choice, and it leads to a lot of bland positions, but yeah, that's what you're gonna get. So, I recommend knight to f6, attacking the pawn right away. If your opponent goes d3, I mean, like, what is this? Come on, like, what? We're just going to develop our pieces and strike in the center right away. So this is not to be worried about. What is to be worried about is e5, but after knight d5, d4, take knight f3, knight c6, just developing our pieces. Note that we cannot take this pawn because our knight is hanging, right? So knight c6, take d6, and you can tell, right, black just has superior development already. He's already attacking this white's slightly overextended center, and yeah, common move is bishop c4, attacking the knight. We'll just attack the bishop right back with knight to b6. Bishop b5, this is all theory. We just take the pawn, knight takes. Of course, white can take back with his pawn, but this is definitely not what he wants, because after takes, and a move like bishop g4, or bishop d7, or g6, and black is already better. White's going to lose this pawn, and he doesn't have castling rights. So that's why knight takes. And after bishop to d7, we are perfectly fine with giving up this bishop, because after takes, white's got something known as an isolated pawn, and all we're going to do throughout this entire game is put pressure on that. We're going to go rook d8, well, maybe not rook d8. We might go rook c8, depending on what happens. We're going to go e6, put pressure on this d4 pawn. We're going to castle, and put even more pressure on the pawn. Now, given all this pressure, right, white's going to lose the pawn eventually, and we should have a pretty nice position. Again, if d4, which, this is what white wants you to go for, right? After c3, I mean, I can't really imagine white playing any other move. This is the kind of gambit that white wants. While you can do this, there's no reason to transpose into your opponent's preparation, right? So let's go knight to f6, attacking the pawn. And after pawn to e5 and knight to d5, you can see that we have the same position as before. you can't even tell, oops, I switch variations, but like, this is the exact same thing. It'll lead to the exact same position, right? We're just going to develop our knight and play d6. And so that leaves us with the meat and potatoes. Knight to f3, the main move. We're going to go for pawn to e6 here. Now, why did I choose this move? Well, first of all, it has the highest win rate out of all the main moves in the Sicilian. So, yeah, that's why I chose it. In fact, it has a higher win rate for black than white, which is rather impressive. So let's take a look at it. Right, d4 is the main move. I've seen a lot of beginners like to go bishop c4. But this is really nothing to worry about. We're just going to develop our pieces as normal, and we're going to go for this nice little move a6. What the idea of a6 is to gain space with b5, but also prevent bishop to b5 if we decide to go d5. Right, so we got these two pawn breaks, or like pawn pushes, available to us. Say knight c3, I mean, it's not the best move, but it does seem like a pretty common move that a lot of beginners would play. Given that you played bishop c4, it seems like you'd play knight c3 next. So, bishop e2, bishop b7. You can tell black's already gained a lot of space. White's pieces are being forced back, and they're just not in good positions. d4, it doesn't strike me as a very obvious move for a lot of players who would have played this way, but say d4 because it's the best move. Takes, and we're going to go for queen to c7. With many of the same ideas as we have in the main line, as we will see. Now, you might say, well, why are you showing me this, right? Where are the tricks? Well, I'll show you, and that's why I'm not continuing this variation, because of the traps that you'll see later. Alright, d4 is the main move. We take, knight takes, and now we play this really interesting move, pawn to a6. This move has an even higher win rate than the more common move, knight to c6. I don't like knight to c6 as much because it's a bit less flexible than a6. Like, you give white an extra option that you have to learn as well. So I prefer a6, and by far and away the most common move is knight to c3, developing a knight. That's pretty much the only thing you need to know. I mean, there's not really a difference. Now queen to c7, and you might say, well, why is black moving his queen out, right? Black, with this move, remains flexible and puts a lot of pressure down the c-file, which is open, by the way, right? And eyes up the king side. That's our whole plan, right? Bishop to e3. Honestly, white has a plethora of choices, but all of them lead to him putting the bishops here and here, or here and here. So this bishop has to go here anyways. I don't really see a better spot for the bishop. If the bishop ever goes to g5, you could probably just kick it with h6 or exchange it. Right, so bishop e3, and let's take a look at bishop e2 first. It doesn't really make a difference because white will have to put the bishop on e3 anyways. So knight f6, castles, and now here comes the fireworks. Instead of playing a normal move, which is completely playable, right? You can definitely play bishop e7. You can go knight to c6. And if you go for those ideas, right, your plan is just to gain space on the queen side, play bishop to b7, and target the pawn on e4. But we're not going to do that. We're going to play for fun, right? Chess is supposed to be a fun game. h5. Let's go. And you might recognize this, right? This is a fishing pole trap. This is the idea of the fishing pole. So bishop e3, say white doesn't really care. I mean, he could care and play something like pawn to h3, stopping knight to g4. In which case, we would just play like normal. Like, we would go here. And in all these kinds of positions, we are completely happy if white takes with this. Because after pawn takes c6, taking towards the center, this is just a main chess principle, right? You usually want to take towards the center. We can move h4 if we want. We don't have to. But the main idea is we're going to play d5 next move, get a big center, and yeah, we just have a big center. We're going to go bishop b7 and put pressure on the king anyways. Going to develop our pieces. Maybe castle, maybe not. In a lot of these positions, black's king is safe in the center. So you can just focus on expanding your center. And a huge idea as well is using the open b file to attack the pawn on b2. So, like, if things go south, don't worry. You always got a backup plan, and black's position is perfectly fine. But why not have fun if you can? Confuse your opponent. Bishop e3, very common move, and yeah, you'll always see the bishop stacked like this and this, or this and this. So let's say bishop here, right? Well, we're gonna go knight to g4 with the very obvious threat of checkmate. Now, any other move than this, and white is immediately just much worse. So, h3, that is checkmate, sir. Bishop g4, hg4 is the white's best option, g3, because if white takes the pawn, right, this is checkmate. Already, right? So g3, blocking checkmate. b5, black is perfectly fine with giving up his pawn, because after a move like, first of all, b4, I believe, equalizes right away. But you can play pretty much anything. The computer likes d6. Knight c6 is fine. Bishop b7 is fine. And even though white is down a pawn, he does not have a light squared bishop and has a lot of light squared weaknesses. Meaning a bishop here would be really powerful. And, yeah, you can definitely attack white's king. So, here's another option. After bishop to d3, right? There is a subtle difference between the bishop on e2 and bishop d3, and that's our idea is even stronger, right? Because on the bishop e2, when we got our knight to g4, right? White could take, but now this is no longer an option. So knight f6, castles, h5 still, bishop to e3, or say h3, yeah. If bishop to e3, we still have this idea of knight to g4. And after h3, well, where we have checkmate, right? But white's forced into an awkward spot. So, let's say he goes for h3, recognizing our idea. But now, the problem with bishop d3 is also that white's queen is not defending his knight. So, this developing move comes with tempo. Knight to f3. And you could have fun, or you could not, right? Knight to c6 is a perfectly fine move with the same ideas as we've always said, right? We're going to go for b5. We're going to go for d5. Lots of pawn breaks, lots of space to be gained. We're going to put our bishop on this diagonal and have a good time, right? But why not have fun? Knight g4. The fishing pole strikes again, right? So we are not exactly threatening anything yet, but the point is we are luring white into taking our pawn. I mean our knight, right? If white does nothing, keep in mind, right? We are going to go knight c6, knight d4, and force white to exchange his knight, or else we're going to checkmate him. And if we get two more moves, we are going to do this, and white is going to lose the game immediately. So he might think it's in his best interest to take the knight, which a lot of players would think, and they would be really wrong. Because after takes, first of all, we threaten to take the knight, and, well, checkmate. And the second thing is that an astounding number of players think, okay, well, simple. I go g3. I block your checkmate. Except they just got checkmated in one move because of this bishop. This bishop is lasering through, and the pawn cannot capture. This is simply checkmate. So this is a really nice trap. Just the fishing pole idea, right? Pawn to h5, just pushing the pawn here, and then moving the knight to g4 with the queen on c7 is really powerful. And it's all because black hasn't castled. So this is really fun to play. Yeah, this is the main line, and yeah, one of the other common moves here after bishop e3 is pawn to f3, right? White stops all of our shenanigans, but unfortunately for him, this is even worse. We go bishop to b4, attacking the knight, and we are threatening to win a pawn. So a lot of players will go queen to d2, just defending the knight. Unfortunately, this is already quite a bit better for black. We go pawn to d5, and the point is obvious, right? We are trying to take, and take. Because white's knight is pinned, it can't take, right? Oh, he would lose his queen. So bishop to d3, defending the pawn, is a very common move. However, it pretty much gets you in big trouble right away. Takes, a3, takes is another option. But black is just simply up a clean pawn here and should be in a really nice position. Not to mention that black can just ignore everything and just castle his king. These pieces aren't going anywhere. Black's already a lot better. So, again, bishop d3, and now pawn to e5. All hell breaks loose, but at the end of the day, black is winning a piece, because when white moves his knight, right, we have a fork. And so, yeah, this is pretty bad. And so you can see how tricky and trappy this variation of the Sicilian is. After e4, c5, knight f3, and e6. And yeah, I honestly think this is the trickiest and the simplest Sicilian to play. So make sure you try it out yourself. That's been it. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.